Now live from Dogleg Brewery in Fort Worth, Texas, it's time for You Can't Brew That on Television with your hosts, the Reverend Ryan Bono and Kyle Crazy Legs LaPointe. Welcome back live, guys.
What's going on, Rich?
How you doing, Rich?
We have a third co-host in here with us right now.
So who's going to help us?
Things are about to take off. Good evening, Internet, and welcome to another exciting episode of You Can't Brew That on Television. With you, as always, is I, the Reverend Ryan Bono, and Kyle LaPointe. And
I think I want to be called the Camel tonight.
Kyle the Camel LaPointe, and we're here as we
drinking
are.
all for us.
That's right. He's drinking everything. So we're here as we are every Monday, trying to help you bridge the gap between frat boy and beer snob.
That's right. We've got a very boring show for you tonight.
It's really horrendous.
So we hope you stick with us through it all. But what are we going to talk about tonight?
We are going to talk about bottling versus kegging.
Cool.
We're going to share a little bit of news from the world of RAR.
Okay.
And we're going to be tasting a beer all the way from Germany.
Oh, what'd you get?
No, not that one. We're not tasting that.
I thought we were tasting
I don't know what that is. I don't know where that came from.
Well, I think I got one of those too.
We are tasting Flensburger Weissen wheat beer. Now, this is fairly popular in Germany, where they have an ad campaign built around the pop. And there you go.
Yeah, not bad.
I think that was a nice pop.
It was a good pop. It's got a zing to it.
Now,
it's a Weiss beer, man. What are you supposed to taste or smell? The first thing, let's talk about, what are you supposed to smell in a Weiss beer?
The first thing you're going to smell in a Weiss beer is the Weiss itself. You're going to get a nice little note of wheat right there in the front of your nose. But you give it a little bit more deeper, taking a little bit more breath, and you're going to get a little bit of, this one has kind of a musty smell.
First thing I get is bubblegum out of this, which is good. The yeast comes out prominently.
I got wheat at first.
Yeah.
No, that's definitely there.
It's bubblegum too, though. Bubblegum, clove and bubblegum are two of the smells you get from it's a specific type of yeast. There's actually really only three main genres of yeast, and this is
what kind of yeast is going to give you that clovey, bubblegummy type of smell?
I'm not sure of the actual name of that one as opposed to a Saccharomyces or exactly.
Yeah,
but
we don't need the Latin name.
It's a German Hefe yeast is what's going to give you that, and they'll give you a certain lower temperature range. If you're going more into the 60s, they're going to give you more bubblegum flavor, and if you're going more into the almost into the 70s, you're going to get more clove flavor and smell. And they're both great.
And just like last week, I'm still under doctor's orders not to drink anything, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway for the show. And
very clean.
It's very clean. I got kind of like a banana bready type of taste out of that.
Yeah, it's definitely the bubblegum kind of yields to the flavor of the wheat, which gives it a little banana flavor.
This is a great beer.
That's really good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, banana's not an uncommon flavor from a wheat yeast.
You'll get banana. A lot of wheat beers are going to have banana, clove. Those are two very common esters in wheat beers. And the Americans are going to get a lot of clove. Even Americans don't tend to like the fruity type of stuff, do they?
Yeah, well, they'll go more like fruity from esters than fruity from the actual cloves or bubblegum or yada yada yada. They tend to go with a cleaner, more typical ale yeast in the wheat beers that we make here.
Definitely. So one of the things that if you go and pick up a bottle of
Flensburger, this is good.
One of the things you're going to notice is a thick layer of, there's no way you're going to be able to see it in our 7 kilopixel camera, but there's a thick layer of sediment at the bottom of the yeast beer, at the bottom of the bottle.
And when we get a little further, I'll show you what happens when you pour out the yeast.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that'll be a really neat part of the show, actually, because tonight, like as I mentioned earlier, we are talking about kegging and bottling. Rich, we've got some trivia for tonight.
Want to roll some trivia?
You ready to pull that out?
I'm ready to pull it out.
Whip that out.
Tonight's trivia question for Kyle and anybody else who's watching and wants to try it out. Carbonated water first became available on a large scale in the U.S. thanks to an invention by a guy named John Matthews. In what decade did he receive a patent on his device?
Carbonated water.
Carbonated water. Okay, so say that question again, because our speakers was cutting you out.
Oh, okay. Let me read the full thing. Carbonated water first became available on a large scale in the U.S. thanks to an invention by a guy named John Matthews. And in what decade did he receive a patent on his device?
A patent on yellow fizzy water.
Actually, it was white fizzy water.
White fizzy water, okay.
Well, it was...
The yellow was added later.
So sanitation methods weren't what they are now. It might have been yellow.
I'm going to go with that decade being in the 20s.
All right.
That's where I'm hitting.
We can talk more about that at the end of the show. Let's give our audience some time to do an internet cheat on it.
So, being that this is a beer that's live that has the yeast in the bottom, if you notice what I was doing earlier, I was shaking up the yeast. Some people will just leave that bottom half inch of beer inside the bottle if they don't want to basically digest the yeast. But that's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to pour this out, and I'll put it forward for you to see, but you'll see that it pours out very milky after this from the yeast that's coming out in the beer. And it'll actually spread in, and in that beer, if you can see it, it's actually starting to come through, and the sediment will fall down through the beer. And that's actually pretty good for you, the sediment and everything. It's
full of B vitamins.
Yep.
It's good for digestion. And it's delicious, really.
It depends on the beer.
My beers to be high in fiber.
It does depend on the beer.
Yeah.
It can mess it up, but
this
a
beer,
lot of it comes down to personal preference and what beer you're drinking.
It added a little bit of spiciness to it in this beer. So the overall flavor added maybe a little bit of sour/spiciness from having a little bit of extra character to it. It's pretty good though, even with the yeast. I mean, it's different. I'd actually prefer it without.
And you see some brewers actually make kind of a big deal out of this. Kyle and I were fortunate enough to meet the 6th generation brewer of Blanche de Bruxelles here just a few months ago.
That's the one.
And he was a really neat guy. I mean, I've seen very few people who love beer more than this guy. And one of their beers is called Hopus Ale. Hopus Ale is bottle fermented. And when you can go to the store and buy a glass for Hopus Ale, and the Hopus glass comes with a little shot glass looking thing, and that is specifically intended to store the sediment after you've poured the beer. You pour 90% of it, and you pour the last little bit into that little shot glass, and then you can either drink that directly, which I wouldn't recommend, but he was pretty excited about it. Or you can add it to the beer, or you can just pitch it.
Yeah, but it's just they add that extra flavor so that it's got I say flavor, it's really not a flavor that they're adding. It's more of a character to the beer. The yeast is going to do what it's going to do. And some people will just pour out a beer completely. I don't necessarily recommend that because you don't know if you like the beer with the yeast at the bottom. You can try it first with just trying the beer, then swirl around the yeast and take maybe a sip of that and see if you like that yeast flavor before you end up going and dumping it into your beer and ruining it. Because some people just absolutely hate it.
Oh, yeah.
They just hate the idea that something's floating in their beer and they can see it. And, you know what I mean?
And actually, it causes some people some unpleasant digestive problems similar to drinking the water in Mexico. So that's never fun. Before we get into tonight's topic, I do want to share just a quick little bit of news from the world of RAR. RAR is going to be at the Omni Hotel in downtown Fort Worth Wednesday night, doing a tasting of a few beers that you can typically only get at the brewery, and the name of those two beers completely escapes me right now.
They've got the
brown
rye imperial stout,
the rye stout,
and then they've got their the oaked brown.
Okay. So very exciting. If y'all are
two small batch beers, they're really good.
Downtown Fort Worth Wednesday night, definitely go check that out.
And I hear that the roofers are supposed to be there next week.
Oh, that is good news.
Yeah. So the roofers tend to work pretty quick. They're only going to put up a structure similar to what was at the Cowboy Stadium, so they figure it'll hold up to at least 40, 50 miles per hour. No, actually, they're going to come in next week, do a good job putting it back up together. And I was talking to another insider over there last night, and he said that that with some of the process changes they're making, they're taking this time of it being down to kind of revamp some of their brew kettle system and how they were doing things. And apparently they had a lot of transfer issues, moving things from the mash tun to the lauter tun, back to the boil vessel. And each one of these things, each time they transfer it would take upwards of an hour, almost an hour and a half. And so by isolating these different issues and actually eliminating some of the different boil vessels or doing things in the same vessel, lautering in the mash tun and that kind of deal, they're going to be able to cut out 3 or 4 hours easy from their brew day, which was normally an 11 to 12 hour brew day.
Excellent.
So yeah, that's good for them.
Very good for them. So tonight we're going to look at the process of getting your beer from the fermenter into a vessel from which it's going to be actually served. And so obviously, the first thing that comes to mind is bottling. The overwhelming majority of homebrewers start with bottling. I know I did.
Yeah, I think virtually everybody does.
If you don't, I mean, you're just way ahead of yourself. And good for you.
And good for you, yeah.
For you.
The traditional kegging costs at least $200 to start.
You're typically not going to sink into it unless you're 100% sure that you're going to
when it costs
the hobby, right?
Twice as much, if not 3 times as much as your basic brewing kit. People just go, I'll wait on that, and rightfully so.
But and frankly, aside from the enormous pain in the neck involved, there's nothing really wrong with bottling. Just going straight to bottle.
Generally, you have really good results from the bottle conditioning, and the beer changes inside the bottle, which is really interesting.
So typically, the way you're going to start as a home brewer is with bottle conditioning. And that refers to what we were talking about earlier with the sediment in here. And what that means is that carbon dioxide is going to be created inside the bottle. And so you're going to bottle active yeast, and you're going to add to it a fermentable sugar. You can use honey, malt, table sugar, corn sugar.
And traditionally, corn sugar is the most common. They call it priming sugar in the beer brewing world.
I was always a big fan of using I made a lot of dark beers, and so I would use just a pitch black malt to go in there. I mean, you can use.
And we've never used anything but honey in the brewing process, and that's we've had great results with the honey. In fact, over-carbonation results in some cases. And so, yeah, it's a little more expensive, but it adds a little sweet character to it that pretty much fits with any beer you're putting it in. Hey, Droid.
So your other option, other than bottling, is going to be kegging. I mean, those are your 2 big options. And kegging is pretty obvious. You're going to pour from your fermenter into a keg, and generally, not all the time, but generally, you're going to force carbonation onto it with CO2 rather than inducing a second carbonation in the cask.
And the reason for that is because of the way the dip tubes fall down into the bottom. Unlike a beer where you're able to do what we were doing earlier and you pour out most of it in the sediments at the bottom, well, since the keg's pulling from the bottom, you're getting that yeast sediment for the first few glasses at least that you're making of that beer are going to be really, really chunky.
However, cask conditioning is gaining in popularity. It's becoming more favorable, so we'll definitely take a look at that as the evening progresses. Mm-hmm. So, first,
we've done that.
Yes, we have done cask conditioning. And I don't know, I like to be a little bit more traditional. I like to do a lot of old school stuff, and so I'm really hoping we can do some more bottle conditioning, and you can use a hand pump.
And that's why he's going through this detox process and doing this deal right now.
Because I'm such a traditional guy.
He's a traditional guy, and so at night he'll let his blood with leeches.
Yeah.
He doesn't actually carry the leeches around with him during the day because that's just unsightly and awkward. But
I don't
at
like
night,
to pay attention to doctors.
And he'll drink some water that will be filled with
I name my
chemicals and fun stuff.
I name my leeches.
Do you name your leeches?
Every night.
How many leeches do you use?
I go with a different theme. Last night I had 9 leeches, and I named them after the Rangers' 9 starters that day.
I thought if you get like one big leech, would it be like the Texas Tech football program?
That would be a gigantic leech. Wow. We got a little bit off topic there. Where were we before we started talking about leeches?
I think we were talking about beer.
We were talking about beer. Cask carbonation. Thank you, Megan. You don't say much, but when you do, it's to the point, and I salute you for it. So, when you're bottle carbonating, there's a number of different ways to go. I started brewing using a Mr. Beer way back in the day, and they had you carbonate each individual bottle. You would actually pour table sugar into each individual bottle. You had to measure it out. It was an excruciating process, and I'm very glad that I don't do it anymore. So typically what you're going to do is you're going to use a measured amount of some sort of sugar, as we mentioned earlier, and you're going to pour it into a bottling bucket.
Very handy to have.
Very, very handy.
They're cheap, relatively. I mean, I think you can get a bottling bucket with a little bit of vinyl hose and a bottle filler, which is basically just a stick with a valve at the end where when you press it, it'll lift it up and allow the beer to come out, but when you let it go, it'll stop flowing the beer so that you don't have to kink lines and do all that crap. All in all, you're talking $25 investment worth every penny.
Absolutely. And when you pour into a bottling bucket, you're going to mix all of your, I guess it's beer at this point. It's not wort anymore.
Beer,
yeah, so you're going to mix all of your beer with your measured amount of sugar in one shot rather than individually with a measuring cup and a funnel.
And traditionally, people recommend putting the sugar, usually it's a sugar water. At that point, you've hydrated it somehow and put that in the bottom of the bucket and then put the beer on top of that. That way it mixes a little bit because you're trying not to disturb the beer. So you're really not going to transfer the beer at full speeds or dropping it from large heights. Right. So it's not going to have a chance to mix unless you do it something like that.
So, and actually, we learned tonight that there's a company called Cooper's that has created something called carbonation drops. And carbonation drops come in a bag that looks like a big bag of jelly beans, and each individual drop kind of looks like a jelly bean.
Yeah.
And it's the perfect amount of sugar for a 12-ounce bottle of beer.
So I guess if you're going Mr. Beer, that's the way to go.
You go Mr. Beer, that is the way to go. You get your Cooper's carbonation drops, cut that bag, drop one into each bottle, pour in the beer, and you're good to go. So
cool.
I was very excited. I thought if I had known about that back in the day, I might have never gone on to Real Brewing.
Yeah.
So maybe it's good that I didn't know about it. You never know.
Well, and you've got different styles with your bottles, too, where I imagine that could cause some issues because some people, when they're bottling a lot, will start to bottle the bombers, the 23-ounce beers, because you're basically bottling one beer that's two different beers worth of liquid. So you're making, essentially one 5-gallon batch will be about 50 beers. So if you do the 23-ounces, you're only going to get about 26, 27 bottles out of that.
Yeah, I definitely started using bigger and bigger bottles when I was
I think
bottling.
we both did.
Because it just got progressively more irritating.
Hey, thank you, Stone. Rogue, don't mind if I do.
There's a lot of advantages, though, to bottle conditioning. Well, first and foremost, I think, is an extended life on your beer. When you're making a beer that has to sit for ages and ages and ages, a lot of times some of the flavor compounds in there, if you just do forced carbonation, the flavor compounds are going to break down and it's not going to be all that good.
Yeah.
But if you bottle condition, I mean, you could, when you're looking at your barley wines, your Belgian dark strongs, anything that's just going to have a big, heavy flavor that'll take a long time to come together, that's when you definitely want to consider bottle conditioning or cask conditioning,
right?
Because the active yeast is going to prevent those flavor compounds from breaking down.
It's pretty good stuff. And you can apparently also bottle foaties.
Oh, you can bottle foaties.
It's a little tougher because of the twist top, but hey, it happens.
Glad to see Matt checking in from High Point, North Carolina, even though his house got stolen by Dorothy.
I have a friend who is in charge of hail and tornadoes, but I don't think it actually covers. He's only in the south, so otherwise I would have told him not to have a tornado hit in North Carolina and they're in High Point. But I mean, the thing about bottle conditioning beers, like you were talking about losing flavors, the other thing with cask conditioning, you can cask condition and then transfer it to bottles and let it go like that, or you can just if you've cask conditioned, you can pull off 2-3 pints, get rid of that other stuff, and you get all the benefits in a keg that you'd get from a bottle. You just may lose 2 or 3 bottles or 2 or 3 pints worth of beer, unless you want to drink the yeasty portions, which we generally just drink them. They're a little bit more tangy, but they're good.
Who's it gonna hurt?
Yeah,
that'll get you your vitamins for the day.
Mm-hmm.
So, really, a lot of benefits to cask conditioning and to bottle conditioning, especially when you're making your bigger beers. But really, there's a few drawbacks, and I think we've highlighted it a few times. And the big one that I'm thinking is just the time involved.
Yeah,
it's a pretty excruciating process especially when you're one at a timing it with little Mr. Bear.
Oh yeah.
But even
you don't have a bottling tree, or you don't have any of these things. You're going cleaning them one at a time. And
cleaning the bottles.
Then you're sanitizing them one at a time. Then you're rinsing them one at a time, and it's just doing that. That's 150 times that you're handling a bottle, and before you even get to the point where you're filling it up. And then you're going to handle it once to fill it up and handle it another time to cap it. So you're talking 250 times of handling bottles to get 50 beers. It's, it could be a 3-hour adventure with 3 or 4 people helping you.
And there is one more method for bottle conditioning that is not typically used, but we feel like we should bring it up anyway, and that's called crosining.
Yep.
It's another German word, another word that comes to us from Germany. And what crosining essentially involves is adding actively fermenting beer to the beer that's already finished fermenting.
Right.
And, of course, it's going to bring sugars with it.
But it's going to bring a lot of live active yeast.
It's also going to bring a lot of live active yeast. And this tends to clear the beer. It tends to have a very clarifying effect. It's going to clarify it both visually and with the flavor.
I thought you were going to go tastefully on that.
No, it
not tastefully.
No, it is not tasteful. Actually, it probably is.
It probably is.
So
And this was kind of invented back when they were making the same batch of beer over and over and over. So while this one batch is fermenting, you've got this other batch that's ready to get bottled, so they just time it where they take some right off of there, put it in the other batch, throw it in the bottles, you're good to go. It's a little more difficult for home brewers because we don't tend to schedule our brews as well. Some people do. Some people
Some people can do it.
They make an absolute effort out of scheduling and planning each of their brews and reusing yeast cakes and reusing this and yada yada.
And I would be concerned about hitting it at exactly the right time because if you toss it in there too early, you're going to overcarbonate.
Oh yeah.
It's either going to look like the beer that Matt sent us a few weeks ago, or it's just going to explode.
Yeah.
It'll look like the ginger ale that we tried to bottle a few months back.
Oh wow.
That just started making popping noises in the garage, and Kyle went in there.
What was that? Oh, it's glass all in
That's
my
right.
garage.
There's glass everywhere and beer.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's ginger beer.
It's ginger, please.
You just can't trust it. So, what else we got tonight? Are we going to revisit this question? How close was I on my answer
think
for the
it is time
decades?
to revisit. I guess you just said the 20s.
Isn't that what you asked? Which decade it was?
Yeah, you didn't say what century. I guess I should have.
Yeah, you said the 20s, was it, Kyle?
Yeah. And the question was which decade, right?
Right, which decade?
Yeah, you're right. So it could have been any century when you said 20s, but it wasn't the 20s. It was the 30s.
Yeah, it was the 30s. So you're only off by about 1800.
By one decade.
Yeah,
Next
1800
time
years.
I'll be a little bit more specific.
I was saying.
Kyle guessed 20 AD, and it was actually 1830. So only about 2,000 years off, but pretty close. Pretty close.
Ginger ale bombs. That's right.
Oh yeah, ginger ale bombs, man. They were the beasts. But
didn't we have a hop topic that we wanted to revisit from last week?
Yes, we wanted to revisit making deodorant, right? Is that what it was?
Yes, that's right. We were going to talk about making deodorant from hops.
Mm-hmm.
This is one we were talking last week about some of the alternative medicine uses for hops, and apparently
just threw up on our shoes over there.
Making people less stinky is one of the many uses of hops.
Well, I guess if you're on a commune and doing your thing, then
I believe
It's got to beat the heat, right?
I believe that the Mormons on the commune in western Texas are using hops for that very purpose.
Really?
Yeah. Little fun fact for you that's completely made up.
And I prefer the whole leaf hops. I'll just smear them all over my body in the morning. Out
Right.
the door, smelling right.
I've heard that you can also make false teeth out of them.
That sounds false.
It is. I told myself that earlier, and then I told myself I'm a liar. But we handled that situation. So we also had a question this weekend from a friend of mine up in Norman when I went up there for the spring game to watch OU play with themselves. And what we ended up doing was sitting there drinking some good beers and having a good time. And then he said, well, what's up with this German purity law? And he said, you've got Heinzgebot.
Heinzgebot.
You've got 4 different ingredients. He said, how do they keep their beers from tasting the same? And it was a good question, really. And I answered to him some of the things about the main difference is that it's kind of a misnomer that there's only 4 ingredients when you can make malt, you can make barley taste so different by kilning processes and how you heat it and how you cook it or don't cook it or stew it and don't stew it and dry it. That it ends up being an infinitesimal amount of ingredients when you really think about it. Not to mention the yeast itself.
Yeast itself could change things, absolutely.
Water
Hops,
content.
type of hops that are going
Type of hops that are going in. So it's not technically 4 ingredients is the basic answer. They're just limiting it to those specific 4 ingredients. So.
Good.
Yeah. Good for you.
The Heinzgebot.
So,
we're finishing up a little bit early tonight.
yeah, we're finishing up early.
Before we roll, best damn beer.
Best damn
gotta
beer.
mention
Thank
it.
you. Good call, Rich.
That's what I do.
Best damn beer.
It's good.
We've come up with the best damn prize, and the best damn prize is pretty damn cool.
It's awesome.
Well, a lot of people speaking on this topic of kegging will end up using the 5-gallon Cornelius kegs that they used for in soda fountains, basically, back in the day. They've eliminated those, gone more to plastic and little boxes. And so now they are selling these things used. Well, there also is another one that you can buy new that's only 3 gallons. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to buy one of these new. We're going to have this thing airbrushed and professionally painted to show and highlight this best damn beer competition. Each competition, if we continue with this, which I'm hoping we will, if everything's a success, each competition will have its own specialty airbrushed best damn beer 3-gallon keg. These things fit easily inside of a fridge because they can be leaned on their side the way that the beer is pulled out from there. You can easily do that. You just overcarb it, put like 30 psi, and leave it for a week, and then shove it in the fridge, and the thing will pump out everything.
Or you can cast condition and just lay it on its side and let gravity do the rest.
Exactly. Exactly.
This is a really cool prize, and we have an artist on board, right?
Right, we do.
Okay, so I think we should use a different artist every year too.
It's possible. I've
seen really cool.
I've seen what this guy does airbrushing wise, and he's awesome. He's local. He's one of our beer club guys, and I tell you, I've seen he does a lot of barbecue pits and such, and they're really sweet. The guy is good at what he does.
If he's good, then
so we'll see. Yeah. We'll run this first one, and I think everybody's really going to like this prize. But best damn beer, it's a competition based on the best beer you have around. It doesn't have to be a style. It doesn't have to be anything that you particularly like. Say you've made a beer. I've had this a couple times where I made a beer and I didn't much care for it, but everybody
else loved it.
Everybody else loved it. Well, that's a perfect place to send that beer, right? Get rid of it. It's made, though, primarily for beers that don't match a style. So, say you tried to brew a brown and it just ended up a little bit too chocolatey, but not hoppy enough to be a English brown, or not hoppy enough to be an American, but it's too chocolatey and too big to be an English brown. You've got a spot for it in this competition because it's still tasty, still good. And I'm hoping to have some pretty good experiences with this. From some of the beers we've heard that are going to come in, that we know are going to come in, are going to be awesome.
I'm really excited to taste some of the beers that I know are going to come in. And I think next year, when people have a little bit more time to prepare for it, I think we're going to get some awesome stuff. So.
Exactly. And it'll be right at the heels of the Celtic Brew Off, which their deadline for turning stuff in is the May 14th. You can go to CelticBrewOff.com. They finally updated their website, got everything on there, so good for them. They're ready to go, and hopefully we'll be right there at the tail end of that. And
Kyle, how many do we have so far, Dave?
How many beers do we have?
I guess
I know of, I've heard of you talk about 3 or 4 different people.
Yeah, we don't have anybody officially entered yet.
No, we haven't really officially started.
Several people we know are going to.
We have at least a dozen right now, and another dozen who've said that they're going to think about, that kind of deal.
Right.
We're easily right around 20 entries that we've got pretty much guaranteed, and we're really just now starting to advertise with the Blue Bonnet ending and with the other competitions firing up right on those heels. It's kind of hard to start a new competition, and so we're just kind of gradually pushing these topics in the different beer club events, and I really feel like it's going to be a fun competition. Showing it live on the internet is going to be incredible.
I think it is going to be really cool.
We'll probably be rude to some people's beers if we get some of them nasty soap tasting beers like we've had before.
If your beer tastes like jacuzzi water, it's going to get ripped merciless. Which actually, it might be fun to submit a really crappy beer.
Or don't tell them to do that.
No, definitely, because if you submit a thoroughly horrendous beer, we are going to be thoroughly mean to it. So,
oh man, I don't.
If you have something laying around that tastes like bleach,
God, that is awful.
Thank you. Exactly. That will be. I think we should all have our own movie sound effects.
We could.
I can have some Billy Madison conditioners better. This is going to be a lot of fun, guys. And Matt is going to submit Bud Light. I really look forward to that, Matt. And we're going to give. Well, we'll give that one some thought, Dave.
Yeah, well, we thought about the worst damn beer, and really the one thing that we kept going back to was that if you're not the best damn beer, you are the worst damn beer.
Yeah.
So we would have had to give 49 prizes. And we thought about that, and so we're going,
I think we could squeeze out 49 door prizes.
We could possibly do something. But right now we're trying to funnel as much of the money back into the main first prize as we can, because, the first place prize, to come through this competition and exit the other end of it being the best damn beer, it's going to be really good, and it's going to deserve something cool. So,
and we'll expect a full keg of it once in a week.
Yeah, we expect that everybody has to submit 14 bottles in case they're good, and we'll drink the other ones, and if they're bad, we'll break them in the parking lot. That's actually not true.
That's my department. So that brings us to the end of another show, and we would like you to always remember that we are not professionals.
So please try this at home. Not bad, beer boy. I don't think Megan would let us give away their eggs.
Oh God, that is awful.
It's what ours should have tasted like had we not over-hopped our wheat like we always do. But
yeah, we do tend to over-hop. People love it though. Man.
I like the over-hopped wheat. It's not over-hopped to the point of being bitter.
No, it's not.
But it's just out of style.
It's not over-hopped the way Stone would over-hop something.
No, you're right on that.
What the hell are you doing?
I'm apparently knocking beer everywhere, but not over.